I'm C. Edward Baldwin, and this is the Ink Report. This past weekend, the Black Lives Matter movement gained additional headlines, this time because of another disruption of a Bernie Sanders campaign event, this one in Seattle. In my blog post yesterday, I wondered why the organization would do such a thing. Why would they attack Bernie Sanders yet again? What did they have against Bernie Sanders? They meaning the Black Lives Matter activists. Then I wondered if the individuals who did the attack on Saturday, if they were in fact part of the Black Lives movement itself. So I sought to find out. And what I found out is there is no national Black Lives Movement organization. What you have is a loosely fitting conglomerate of different parts of the organization spread throughout the nation. You have Black Lives Los Angeles, Black Lives Seattle, Black Lives Chicago, Black Lives New York City, Black Lives Wilmington here in North Carolina. I think there's a Black Lives Durham. And connected by a consciousness, if not a structural foundation, and definitely not a head. And where that becomes a problem is now certain entities of the organization, of the movement, want different results. And there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or a reason to what they want and what would be a measure of that success. When Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley were disrupted in Phoenix, it seemed the major cause was because neither of the candidates understood the hashtag Say Her Name, which some people said was because of what it meant for Sandra Brown. And then others said it was to name all the black females who have been held in custody and died at the hands of the police. So there was a little disconnect in that. This past weekend in Seattle, the young ladies seemed to be upset at the response of the candidates in Phoenix, not necessarily just because of the hashtag Say Her Name. In other words, they wanted Bernie Sanders to have done something, but what that something was, I'm clueless. So I can imagine Bernie Sanders is clueless. And you get that type of disruption or incoherence when there's not a head of the organization, when there's not a coherent vision and a consistent vision. And that's what you have now. Everybody who's part of the movement don't necessarily understand all that they want. Most blacks or African Americans support the movement in the terms of what it was initially standing for, or what I would say the outwardness of it stands for, meaning Black lives do matter. We have seen too many cases of African Americans dying in the custody of police. We have seen too many cases of law enforcement or the law or even the nation not seeming to care as much when a black individual dies, as if the life itself didn't mean anything. So Black Lives Matter, the hashtag, resonates with a lot of blacks, a lot of African Americans. But the organization itself, well, there is no organization. So some people want to move from the organization or the movement from Twitter, social media, into the real world. They want it to form to something. They want a real movement, like the civil rights movement of the 60s, the farm labor movement of the 50s and 60s. But those two movements had something in common. They had a face of the movement. And when you get the face of the movement, then you get legitimacy. Then you can get some concrete things done. Right now, Black Lives Matter movement say they want to see the end of the oppression of blacks. They want to see blacks gain a fair shake in the justice system. If you go through the Black Lives Matter website, they have such things as they demand through the network that the federal government discontinue its supply of military weaponry and equipment to local law enforcement. They want to call on the office of the U.S. Attorney General to release the names of all officers involved in killing black people within the last 5 years, both while on patrol and in custody. They want to advocate for a decrease in law enforcement spending at the local, state, and federal levels and the reinvestment of that budgeted money into the black communities. They also sought justice for Mike Brown's family. Mike Brown was the young man that was killed in Ferguson. They wanted to seek justice for his family by petitioning for the immediate arrest of Officer Darren Wilson and the dismissal of the county prosecutor, Robert McCollum, and groups that were part of the local Hands Up, Don't Shoot coalition had already called for Wilson's swift arrest, and some Black Lives Matter riders also canvassed McCullough's neighborhood as a way of raising the public awareness of the case. So, from humble beginnings, you would say, the Black Lives Matter movement now wants to be or at least some parts of some people within the movement want the movement to be more than just a movement. They want some other things. But without a head, that's going to be difficult. You want to hold Bernie Sanders accountable, but for what reason? Because even based on the website of your list of demands, that's not anything that Bernie could possibly do. So you're disrupting 2 of his events, calling on him to do something that he will have no idea what. And then if you go and look on the different websites or different Facebook pages, because there's only one website that I could find, but there were several branches of Black Lives Matter movement that have Facebook pages. And on all these pages, I've seen lists of current cases where an African American has been held in police custody, for what they consider erroneous reasons or faulty reasons. But there's no collective thought process other than blacks are being screwed in Los Angeles, blacks are being screwed in New York, blacks are being screwed in North Carolina, blacks are being screwed in Phoenix. Just a listing of all the different cases where blacks have been screwed, but nothing to coordinate around. There's no structural organization, no head. And so Bernie Sanders would be at a loss. Martin O'Malley would be at a loss. Other than saying a couple of platitudes, there's nothing to be done because there's nothing clearly stated. So, in my mind, if members of the movement want to take the next step forward, or want the country to take the next step forward, want the politicians to take the next step forward, the movement itself has to take the next step forward and organize itself a little more traditionally structured. And they're going to have a head, someone who speaks for the organization, someone who is a face of the movement. Because as it stands now, Bernie Sanders or Martin O'Malley or Hillary Clinton or even someone on the Republican side can reach a consensus agreement with Black Lives Matter activists in Seattle and then run into New York City or Dallas and be faced with the same type of disruption that Bernie faced in Seattle. That's what happens when you don't have a head of a movement. You don't have a face of a movement. And there's just nothing wrong with a blob if your intent is to not ever be defeated, and you can spread in so many different places. But if the intent becomes advancing the cause, then that blob will need a head. That blob will need to take on the consciousness of a single entity that speaks for the whole blob. So Black Lives Matter movement is a great cause. I cannot stress that enough. It was timely. It was needed. But now, parts of the movement, individuals within the movement, want the movement to be so much more. And that is a worthy cause. But it can't be much more without a head. As I stated before, every movement needs a head, needs a face of it. And so once you get that face and you get that head and you get that consistent message, that coherent message, then incidents like what happened in Seattle won't happen again. The head of the organization can then speak with the candidates, speak with leaders in power, and can affect real change. Anger is good as a catalyst, but anger won't get you to the next level. And there's no better example of that than the civil rights movement. You had anger in the form of Malcolm X, which was needed. And then you had Martin Luther King Jr., who could help channel that anger into something meaningful and useful that can advance your cause forward. So, in order for the movement to move forward, in order for the movement to stop having incidents of civil disobedience and disruptions that will ultimately end up in arrests, and only arrests, until you can get beyond that and get that anger channeled, the movement will be stagnated. And then there has to be a weeding out or a tampering down with entities whose only desire is to disrupt and create chaos. And I see that there are some, I fear that there are some parts of an organization that's all they want to do. And that's evident when you go to the different Facebook pages and you read some of the comments. Some individuals' only desire is to disrupt and create chaos. And until there's an organizational structure with a leader, a head in place, those voices will become just as loud as voices who want to affect positive change. And that undermines the whole movement. So, if the movement wants to move forward, if the movement wants the candidates like Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump or Ben Carson or Jeb Bush, if the movement wants results and want those leaders to do something, then the movement has to get ahead and let that head speak to the entire movement. Speak for the entire movement. Okay?